Hidehiko Araki, when writing JoJo, usually builds his fights off of tension and suspense, using this method to keep the readers invested in the story, be it by creating overwhelming obstacles for the protagonist to climb, or frequently throwing out curveballs to shock the status quo so no one exactly knows when a fight might go from a cakewalk to fatal, along with making it feel like it's never fully forced when that shift occurs. Though sometimes Araki desires to experiment with his own writing ability, changing up how he could use suspense in a different way and make the mundane terrifying. And Part 4 itself was full of moments like this, but probably the best example is the execution of Let's Go Eat Italian Food, the arc.
Tension, tension, tension. We as people tend to get tense if we feel insecure, as safety and security are two very important aspects of everyday life, meaning we must deal with it on a daily basis, and sometimes it can be really hard to find a all-in-one solution. In fact, most internet users aren't even aware of the amount of surveillance, limitation, or data mining that happens to their personal information on a daily basis. Wouldn't it be great if there was that one solution that would get rid of most of these problems? Surfshark VPN is that solution, as Surfshark VPN turns you into an anonymous and hard-to-track online user, making the internet a safer and more enjoyable place for you. With one click of a button, you can forget about data mining or intrusive advertisement. Along with this, it allows you to overcome geo-blocking. Do you know what geo-blocking is? It's a function that websites like Disney Plus and Netflix utilize so that they can have different movie catalogs for each country, and I feel access to movies should not be tied to nationality. And Surfshark agrees, as it gives you all the access you need. Just connect to the service and refresh the page. Access granted. And using Surfshark is really simple, as it automatically starts up whenever you start your computer, and whenever you need it, you can just activate it with the simple click of a button. Do you want to get on this Surfshark action? Well, you can do so with promo code METI to get 80% off and 3 extra months for free. Along with this, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk when riding those waves. Surf at your own pace with your own rule set. And be sure to check out the link in the description below. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video.
Let's Go Eat Italian Food is a fan-favorite arc in JoJo, and one of the first real great examples of Araki playing fully with readers' expectations, as it was designed to create an atmosphere of danger and tension within the arc, but never letting the metaphorical bomb go off. And this can be felt throughout the whole arc itself, and I wanted to go through and look at the arc and analyze Araki's usage of tension and suspense. First, we'll be looking at the manga version of the arc, which opens with Okuyasu and Josuke on their way home from school, as they stumble upon a sign showing off a new restaurant opening up in Moriocho. Okuyasu attempts to guilt-trip Josuke into going there, and the two ultimately agree on this, all the while pointing out how strange it is that someone would open up a restaurant next to a graveyard. This strangeness helps build atmosphere and uneasiness, which is only expanded on once the two reach the restaurant, as once inside, they encounter the head chef Tonio Trisardi, who not only demonstrates strange occult knowledge with his extremely accurate palm reading, but he also explains that he doesn't use a menu in his restaurant. Instead, he brings the food that his customers need. These two elements, on top of the location of the restaurant, make him an extremely strange-looking and more suspicious man. On top of this, what reinforces this paranoia of Tonio as a character is the fact that every person in Part 4 prior to this has been a dangerous stand user. And we as the reader are actually made privy to the fact that Tonio might be a stand user from the reaction to the water that he offers Josuke and Okuyasu, as both agree that the water tastes great, but after drinking it, Okuyasu's eyes begin to tear up and a steady flow of heavy tears begin pouring out of his eyes against his will. And this begins to get so bad that Okuyasu's eyes actually start to shrivel up until they suddenly pop back to normal, with Okuyasu even claiming afterwards that he feels better than he did before, which leaves Josuke, and the reader, reasonably suspicious of this cook. And this is all Hitchcockian-like setups for suspense in a story, as this arc plays onto the prior knowledge that we had before, with the prior arcs of the manga showing us all different blends of stand users, be it Tamami, the con man, Hazamada, the future Hikikomori, or Yukako, the original yandere. These stand users all come in different shapes and personalities, but so far they were all equally dangerous for our main cast. This leaves the arc with a never-ending tension or suspense, waiting for the moment that Tonio will snap like the rest, which is actually very similar to Hitchcock's allegory of the bomb under the table.
4 people are sitting around a table, talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it. Suddenly, a bomb goes off. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene. and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table. So the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working.
And a reference to Hitchcock's writing is likely intentional, as Araki mentioned in his book, Manga Theory and Practices. When writing manga, he tends to keep Hitchcock on the mind, as he uses a book called Hitchcock and Truffaut as something that helped him stay grounded when writing his manga, because no matter how much his editor doubted his choices, he'd have this book to give him confidence in his work. Along with this, what can't go without praise is the level of relatability added to this arc, making it very easy to get wrapped up in the suspense of it all. And that's the fact that Josuke and Okuyasu aren't bound to the situation by any supernatural force. It is purely through the social contract of paying their bill for their food. Josuke even suggests that they dine and dash if they feel they weren't given something that tastes good enough for them. And this is a situation that almost all readers could have been in at some point, especially the younger ones. That being, going to a restaurant you've never been before and both not knowing what to order or how you'd feel about the food there. But then Araki takes that subtle, uncomfortable feeling of being in a new place and takes it to an extreme with the body horror that begins to occur. And on top of all that, all of this information I've discussed here is given to the reader within the first chapter. A perfectly crafted, suspenseful hook for a very interesting arc. But as the arc continues, ours, alongside Josuke's, suspicion begins to rise, as Tonio brings Okuyasu his appetizer, this being a caprese salad, and it mostly gets a positive response. While Okuyasu didn't eat it correctly at first, once Tonio assists him, he finds it completely delicious and refuses to share it with Josuke. And as Josuke is requesting the dish himself, Tonio informs him that he'd do it, but this dish is only useful for someone who has a stiff shoulder. Then Okuyasu begins to dig at his shoulder while Tonio glows with stand energy, fully confirming to us, the reader, that he is indeed a stand user, and working off of that logic and the logic of the previous arcs, that he's likely a threat to Josuke and Okuyasu, building up the tension of their arc even more, much like the bomb analogy. The audience is now keenly aware of the perceived threat. Though again, like with the water, the food manages to soothe Okuyasu's ailments, and ease part of the tension in the room, while leaving open room for skepticism, especially so when Josuke starts questioning Tonio, who either plays off the incident as nothing more than the natural process of his food, or outright ignores and scowls at Josuke, which, given Josuke is sort of our outlet for the arc, it feels like Tonio is in some way scowling at us as well. And this allows us to see partly that Tonio isn't being fully truthful with us, laying in seeds of doubt within the reader regarding the nature of Tonio's own actions. But given the result, the boys are compelled to stay. Along with this, the fact that Okuyasu has been ignoring Josuke's concerns seems to be done in a way to build up the same feeling that you see in a thriller movie where characters ignore signs of danger, especially ones which the audience have more knowledge of going in. And with that all in mind, the third dish, a pasta dish, is brought forward at the end of the second chapter. And this new dish presents a new type of problem, this being that the spaghetti sauce made with it utilizes peppers, and Okuyasu can't handle spicy food at all. So he begins to fight with his desire to eat the food, and though Tonio does respect his decision when he says that he can't, and Josuke suggests that he just doesn't eat it at all, Okuyasu feels compelled to wolf down the whole thing. And yet again, he suffers from another horrible bout of body horror, but bounces back better than before. Though 3 strikes is enough for Josuke, and he investigates and catches up with the audience to the fact that Tonio is in fact a stand user, ending the third chapter with this revelation. Then, on the fourth and final chapter, it opens with Okuyasu then suffering from a stomach-related problem, and the only logical solution that the reader and Josuke can jump to is that Tonio is attacking Okuyasu with his stand. So in order to save his friend, Josuke enters the kitchen, and here we enter a roller coaster-like ascension of tension. First we find Tonio feeding food to a dog in the back when suddenly the dog's stomach bursts open, spilling its guts astrew. This scene is obviously done to paint Tonio in the worst possible light. Araki has mentioned before in the past that the reason he tends to kill dogs a lot is that it's the easiest way to establish someone as evil, since most people love dogs and anyone who would hurt them is considered immoral or evil. So Tonio supposedly killing this dog is supposed to reinforce our preconceived notion that he is secretly evil, backing it up again with the sinister face he strikes when Josuke intrudes into his kitchen and the fact that he throws a knife in his direction, which can be perceived as Tonio attacking and punishing Josuke for figuring him out, along with calling out, "I will never forgive you for this," like a villain. But if it wasn't worse enough yet, then Okuyasu Okiyasu, caving to his desires, begins to enter and eat Tonio's freshly prepared main course, this being lamb with apple-based sauce strewn atop of it, and while he scarfs it down, he suffers from the same fate as the dog, leaving Josuke no choice but to try to help his friend, turning his back to the man that we assume is the villain behind all of this, who we then see appear behind him and raise a brick-shaped object over his head, which I must reinforce, in black and white manga, that looked like a brick. This is the metaphorical bomb about to go off, and the audience is well aware of it, but then, with a swift hand motion, it's revealed that Tonio is only offering Josuke some soap to wash his hands. And then it's revealed that the previously assumed dead dog is actually nice and healthy, along with Okiyasu back on his feet better than ever. Tonio then explains his reasoning for freaking out is tied to his concerns with Josuke bringing his unwashed hands into the kitchen without his permission, and also wanting to keep his cooking ingredients a secret, so he snapped a little and went maybe a bit overboard. And once it's learned that he wasn't a threat, the tension is relieved, and the humor of the whole situation begins to set in, which itself is Hitchcockian by nature, as Hitchcock himself said that the bomb should never go off.
The bomb must never go off. Because if you do, you work that audience into a state, and then they'll get angry because you haven't provided them with any relief.
And funny enough, there was actually enough hints throughout these 4 chapters itself to realize Tonio wasn't actually evil at all. Starting first, Tonio was never the antagonizer in this situation. It was always Josuke and Okiyasu. They went to his restaurant, he offered them food, and he only gave off negative vibes when Josuke gave them to him first. He was also always upfront with his methods, fully explaining how to eat the food, what the food is made of, and where it came from. Along with this, the effect of his stand seemed too random in its effect to be an actual attack. Josuke drank the same water Okiyasu did, and they drank it around the same time, but only he didn't suffer from the body horror effects. Along with this, Okiyasu's stomach ache that starts off chapter 4 and really gets us motivated to go after Tonio because we think he's causing it, is explained in chapter 1 when Tonio diagnoses him. So readers who are paying attention can actually make that conclusion there. So any cause for alarm is based on the reader and Josuke's biased view that Tonio was already secretly evil. And then of course, while this requires some knowledge of the mangaka himself, Araki is a bit of an Italophile. That means he loves Italy and Italian culture. So when Tonio is unabashedly patriotic towards his home country of Italy, it's kind of a wink and nod fourth wall way of saying that he's basically innocent. But most important of all, and this is only really noticeable on a reread of the chapter, the reason that Tonio is so keen on dodging the weirdness of his stand's effect is likely due to the fact that he's never met a stand user before, and unlike Rohan, he doesn't feel the need to explain to everyone that he has some invisible tomato ghost that could cure wounds with food, but instead he opts into using pseudoscience explanations for the reason why the food is taking the effect that it does, which is shown to him to have a more positive effect on his customers. Araki successfully built upon his previous chapters and worked within JoJo as a whole to successfully build probably one of the most iconic fights in the series, as it is a one-sided struggle which utilizes relatable situations that get elevated to an 11 out of a possible 5 in intensity, and David Productions approached this arc and handled it with care as well, adding some unique scenes that help build upon that suspense found in the original version of the story. The biggest addition is the opening scene, which paints a dark black kitchen with a quiet chef slowly disemboweling something, while flashing an evil smile, and the camera hones in on a dog cage behind him, foreshadowing the later events while also building up the notion that Tonio might have just chopped up another dog. But along with that, the anime is visually interesting as well, with the best example being the use of the kitchen as a whole when Josuke rushes into it, as the first time he enters, it's shrouded in darkness and Tonio stands crazily in the corner next to an innocent dog. And once the acceleration of tension begins, that roller coaster-like ascension, we get the shift in color palette, and this also helps hide that brick-like structure. Remember how I mentioned in the black and white it looked like a brick? Here, since the colors are shifted, we aren't sure what he's holding until it's revealed. Though, after the tension is lifted, Tonio's motives are revealed, the kitchen loses that spooky atmosphere entirely, and it just becomes a place of work. Overall, I say Let's Go Eat Italian is a fantastic example of Araki's writing chops. He managed to pull off exactly what he set out to do, and he did so spectacularly, as not only does it make something as mundane as a restaurant as scary as any other fight in JoJo, but it also helped continue the mysterious nature of Moriocho as a whole, expanding the lore of the town. And if you want to see more of Tonio himself, I've actually made a full video on him, so please check that out if you're interested. And if you like this video and want to see more videos like in the future, please head on over to my Patreon. Patreon helps keep this channel running and helps me keep motivated. Along with this, if you want some great cooking advice on how to build some very interesting food, quote unquote, you can do so by picking up a copy of Shimoneta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimoneta.com.